The transitive property and substitution are two concepts that they present together in the book, and I think it gives students a little bit of confusion. So maybe we can take one at a time, and hopefully it'll help you to understand it. Let's walk through this proof and see how you use each of the two properties, or the transitive property and substitution is not really a property, but that's another discussion. So let's take the givens one by one. They tell us that FG is congruent to KJ. Okay, from the diagram, maybe that's believable, maybe it's not. And then they tell us, secondly, that GH, and I'll mark that with 2 tick marks, is congruent to KJ also. So now I have to put 2 tick marks on KJ, which means I have to put 2 tick marks on FG as well. So now, we start writing out our proof. We start off with the givens, and we get those first 2 done. And then the third one, we see that FG is congruent to GH. And that's because if segments are congruent to the same segment, then they are congruent. But for our purposes, we can just write transitive property. You'll see that in our statements, all 3 of the statements were congruencies. And whenever that's the case, it's most appropriate to use transitive property. So, knowing now that FG is congruent to GH, it sets up the conclusion that KG, that segment, must bisect FH, because if a segment divides it into 2 congruent parts, then it bisects the segment. Okay, so that's how you use a transitive property. We know to look for the multiple congruencies, and you can just write transitive property. Now let's take a look at when we use substitution. Okay, in the second example, they give us a diagram, but also 2 algebraic sentences. The first one is that angle 1 plus angle 2 is 90. Now that is what I call a relational statement, because it tells us how angle 1 and angle 2 relate to each other. And then we have a congruency statement. And the congruency statement tells us that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Alright, so they want us to prove that angle 3 plus angle 2 equals 90. Well, it's not too hard to see that angle 1 is congruent. Angle 1 shows up in both of these. So when we get to the statement we have to prove, we've clearly just replaced or substituted angle 3 with angle 1. So hence the proof. We write out our givens in the first 2 steps, and then the third step is very clear, that angle 3 plus angle 2 is 90, and that's by substitution. Now, it's nice to give your reader a sense of what the substitution was. That becomes more necessary in more difficult proofs. Here it's rather self-evident. But notice that we did not have 3 congruency statements like we did in the earlier example with transitive property. Here we have an addition or subtraction or some type of an operation going on. And then we had a second statement, which was a congruency statement. That's how you can recognize when to use substitution. All right, Ramblers, I hope these 2 examples helped you to understand the difference between these 2 properties. Thanks for watching.